Whoa, totally green today, top to bottom. Green garden guys in green. Well, you can please all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. Had complaints about the fact that occasionally I'm not talking about garden problems. They want me to talk about garden problems, so that's what I'm here for. Now, the reason I'm inside in my dining room doing this, ordinarily I would be in the studio, but no one's in there working on the computer. And outside, I got a new mower guy, and there's a couple of guys out there making a heck of a lot of noise. Gracie came running in terror with her ears cocked back. She says, there's stuff going on all over. So instead of my usual position in the woods with the chirping birds, I'm going to work from the kitchen dining room area today. It's got good light. I look good here, yeah? Okay. Right, Grace? The request was definitely about problems people have right here on the island. And for sure, I do occasionally run across a problem. By and large, I don't have problems. This is why I don't talk about them much. I'm a solution-oriented person. I usually look ahead to see what might I be faced with here, and I usually try to extinguish fires long before they even ignite. So my whole approach is being a step ahead of the pests, being a step ahead of the diseases, not being back here getting attacked and going, oh no, I got problems. See, it's one reason I don't talk about problems much, because I don't have too many of them. If I was to point at, probably for me, the biggest problems, okay, things that I really can't control very well. Number one, birds. Yeah, Hawaii is the worst place I have ever been for marauding bird pests. This place is horrible. We imported so many exotic birds here that are invasive species. Down at this elevation on the mountain where I'm at, we really don't have any of the nice native honey creepers or any of that stuff. All we have is exotic invading junk species. They are totally reliant on human beings, pretty much, and so they prey on crops constantly. And the Japanese white-eye, boy, he's a little bugger because he likes to suck sweet stuff, and they have a sharp little beak, and they're in big flocks. And so, as an example, if they're in my hibiscus drinking nectar, who cares? Doesn't matter. That's fine. But if they're in my satsuma tree and they're poking holes and everything, trying to get orange juice, the whole tree rots, you know. Cardinals. Ugh, cardinals. I hate them things. They pull seeds up in the nursery. They pull seeds up in the garden. Now, you get a corn stalk that high. They come by and pull it up and look to see if there's a seed on the bottom. They eat berries. They eat all my blueberries, you know. And that's one of the reasons that I really like, say, Mysore raspberry, for instance, because it is so bristly. And I go out to pick fruit, I will often find bird feathers caught in the bristles where the birds tried to eat, but they couldn't. They got caught. On the other hand, all my thornless blackberries and blueberries, I've tried CD discs, I've tried reflective mylar tape, I've tried reflective mylar pinwheels, I've tried 4 different types of netting. None of it works very well. And so, by and large, what I've done about a lot of this is that I actually just gave up on a lot of crops that the birds tear into. Stick on the ones they don't. I plant citrus that's got hard rinds now. For instance, you know, if I see that jabuticaba, for instance, has turned black, get it off the tree. Get it off the tree. Harvesting as fast as possible. Don't let anything sit around here. Whoa. Yeah, if it looks like it's about ready to eat, get it in the kitchen. Otherwise, forget it. You're going to lose it all. It'll disappear overnight. Yeah, I can get trees full of jabuticaba out here. I'll see them one day. I go by the next. There's nothing left. It's all on the ground. Yeah. So, birds, number one, and birds are one of the things I haven't really found a very good solution for. Gracie helps a little with them, she's a cat. I use a 177 pump pellet gun. It works to a certain extent if I'm paying attention, but neither myself or my cat are going to eradicate every cardinal on the island, so they just keep coming in waves. And that also includes chickens, by the way, too. Another terrible bird pest. The island's infested with wild chickens, and they'll go through and they'll eat every cherry tomato in the garden in one evening, just like that. They're terrible. Now, the chickens, at least, are big enough to put into a soup pot. And so I don't see a lot of waste with them, but the rest of it. Well, enough on the bird thing, because I have no good solutions. If there's somebody out here other than using a net, who's figured out how to keep birds off of blueberries, I'd sure like to know. Otherwise, another one of the constant nagging problems that everybody has here on this island, and it's root-knot nematode. Root-knot nematode is a big deal here. Again, I don't really have a problem with it too much. I'm ahead of it. I know we have root-knot nematodes, so that means plants that are susceptible to root-knot nematode, I use resistant varieties. And so like when you're looking at tomatoes, for instance, and it says VFN, right? V stands for verticillium, F stands for fusarium, and the N is for nematodes, which means that plant will resist nematode. And so when planting susceptible crops, resistance to nematode is key. Pole beans, green beans, that's one that nematodes just devastate here. I use Poamoho. It's from the University of Hawaii, and it's very resistant to nematode. I can often get it to push through a reflowering even, so I get more than one crop off a vine. Most other vines, beans, they drop dead to the nematode after making a sparse crop. So nematode resistance. Nematodes hate the organic matter. When you're applying compost, wood chips, that sort of stuff, kitchen garbage and whatnot, manures on your ground, there's biological and chemical reactions that occur when you're doing that, and it is hostile to nematode. One of the things definitely is that certain funguses actually will eat nematode, and they prefer organic matter. And so a fungus that's well known to eat nematode is the Straparia Ragosa angulata, the wine cap mushroom. All you need for a wine cap, other than the spawn, is about 2 inches of wood chips without weeds underneath, about an inch of spawn from a wine cap, and about another inch of wood chips pressed over the top. Kind of a moist, somewhat semi-shaded area works best. Yeah, they actually produce little loops in the mycelium that when a nematode crawls through there, it constricts on them. It digests the nematodes. So it turns your nematodes into mushrooms. That's definitely one approach to dealing with the nematode. Resistant varieties, fungus and organic matter that will harm nematode. Mustard crops, and most things related to mustard, like the brassicas, like broccoli and cabbage and whatnot, but especially regular old, broadleaf mustard. I've used Pacific Gold cultivar here before. It worked really well as a cover crop against nematode. If you take an area in your garden where you're having trouble with nematodes, well, let's face it, they're there. You live in Hawaii. And if you plant a great big solid mat of mustard greens and then just let them grow up, and about the time they start to hit flower, go out there and cut them all down. Don't pick them up, don't till them in. cut them down and let them lay on top of the soil. As they decompose, the gas the mustard creates is very hostile to nematode. It will drive them out. Resistant varieties, compost, funguses that eat nematodes, cover crops that repel nematodes. I don't think this is the best area of the world to be using winter rye, cereal rye grain seed, but it's worth a try. I haven't used it here. I've used it in other places before as a cover crop, and it also has a natural nematicide when it's laid down to the soil. So cover crops are very useful in repelling nematodes. And with nematodes, if you have a vegetable area where you're working, year after year after year, growing crops, if you are constantly using things like, organic matter applications, if you're growing mushrooms in your garden and wood chips, all of these things done year after year, over and over and over. Eventually, it will never remove all the nematodes, but it makes it so hostile for them that they become kind of just a minor issue. Okay, so as I said, I don't have problems. We put out fires ahead of time. Another big deal here, and pretty much everybody's got this problem, and it's the rat lungworm. The rat lungworm is and is not an issue. Like most things, when they get into social media, it becomes nonsensical after a while. And so the dreadful fear of this problem is, in my opinion, ridiculous, because, again, it's a matter of you put out fires before they happen by using proper solutions, and you won't have rat lungworm. Somebody was looking at my video from yesterday, and they said, "You got lettuce in the ground." Yeah, I do. What do you do about the slugs? Well, I know after I got a case of that stuff, I was very, very cautious to begin growing my lettuce in 25-gallon poly tree planters, squat tree planters, and then I'd circle them with copper, self-adhesive copper foil you can buy on rolls, and you just put a band of the stuff around the barrel. Watching a slug try to crawl over a band of copper is a lot like chewing on tin foil. It conducts minute electric current from the atmosphere, and they shudder when they touch it and back down. So you usually don't get many slugs into a planter that has a copper barrier. Some people will use 2 strips and then put a 9-volt battery on bell wire between them. That makes an electric slug fencer. It's a cool idea. I approve, but I don't feel I have to go that far to get the effect. Usually it's well over 90%. I don't get any slugs in those planters if I got a copper barrier. If I do get one, first thing I do is throw out the lettuce. I'm not going to bother with that, But as far as in the open ground, now that's a little bit more complicated to explain, because the reason I can do it is because I have these habitual cycles of how I cope with weeds, cultivation, blah, 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 out in the vegetable garden. And they're intended in such a way that one of the things they do is they mess with the slug population. And so by repeating that action continuously over time, numbers of slugs drop way off. Okay, they're only in huge concentrations when nobody's done anything about them. We start battling them, they retreat to some extent. And so the way I do this is that the soil we have here is volcanic ash. It's extremely soft. We got a lot of rainfall here. I cannot till this earth. If I till the earth, which I have, and we get one of those massive gully washing rainfalls, then it washes down the mountain. And so I stopped tilling quite a few years ago. I ordinarily will actually plant all of my crops into the stubble from the weeds or from previous crops. Okay, I do not disturb the soil any more than necessary. If I got to dig up a sweet potato, I dig up a sweet potato, but that's as far as it goes. So I do it mostly by laying down woven industrial style weed block. I use very large pieces of it. I buy it in 12-foot by 300-foot rolls. And in the vegetable garden, I have large sheets of it that are mobile. I pick them up and I move them around depending on my needs. So if I have, say I finished a crop of corn, I cut all the corn stalks down, I throw them on the ground for organic matter, and then I cover everything up with the weed block and pin it down so it doesn't blow up. And I usually wait about maybe 2 or 3 months is all it takes on, say if it was just had been the vegetable patch. It'll kill all the weeds and everything that's underneath there. And well, when I pick it up, there's going to be both slugs on the back of the weed block and there's going to be slugs on the ground. The ones that are on the weed block, when I flip the weed block over, I put it into a different spot. I walk around with a pair of pruning shears and I cut the slugs into little pieces without touching them and just leave them to sunbake on the weed block. As far as the ones that were on the ground, I have a 400,000 BTU Rotar Flamer here. It's propane powered, and I just go out there and I just flame the ground. Now, sometimes instead of using weed block, if the weeds aren't too bad, I will just use the flamer to prepare for site. If I'm going to put in a crop, I'll maybe just go out and just flame. Well, in the process of flaming, any slugs that happen to have been there, they're done. They can't take the heat. So next, I will use slug baits. Now, around food, I like to use products like Sluggo, which are organic, based on iron phosphate, relatively non-toxic. Unfortunately, in Hawaii's environment, Sluggo doesn't even last hardly 24 hours before the pellets go up into mold and they're basically gone. It's an all right thing. You want to use it, go ahead and do that. But I switched to a deadline bait from BEI made for tropical conditions that's got a paraffin base. So it's got a wax carrier that it doesn't break down in the rain for almost 2 weeks around here. And so I will bait and wait 2 weeks. That any slugs that I didn't cut up, any slugs that I didn't fry with the flamer and that were, somewhere around the surrounding area, well, they all come on out for that bait because it draws them. This is an important fact about bait that a lot of gardeners overlook. It's a bait. It's like when you're going fishing. If you put a worm on the hook and you whip it in the pond, fish that weren't there come because they can see the motion, they smell the worm maybe, and so bait draws things. So a lot of times what I see people do is they'll take bait and they'll put it around their crop. This is the wrong way to use it. You will draw more slugs to the area of the crop than you had to begin with, and a lot of them won't eat the bait, they'll eat the crop. I'm told that slugs and snails can smell the bait for as much as like 75 to 80 feet away. I've had figures even further than that. I don't know what's true, but they can smell it and they come for it. So you use your baits ahead of any planting is a good way to do it. If you have your plantings in the ground, bait away from the crop, maybe in the next row or something, or in the walk row or some place where you're not throwing it around your crop. All right. But again, I use a blue paraffin-based pellet that works here under our conditions. It's not my favorite stuff. I don't particularly care for methaldehyde, but I don't care for rat lungworm either. So there are things that are trade-offs as far as it's concerned. Like I say, I wait 2 weeks anyway till the bait is completely gone and ineffective, and then I'm doing my planting. Okay, and so it takes maybe 60 days to raise the crop of lettuce. So you gotta harvest. Sometimes it's always great. Look, you got cabbages and lettuce and all this stuff sitting out there in the garden. Oh, how nice. I think I'll go out and trim off a couple leaves. Baloney. If that head looks like it's about ready to eat or anywhere even close to it and you're hungry, take it in the kitchen. Do not leave anything around in the garden in this environment. It'll just load up with slugs, bugs, diseases, problems, nematodes, you name it. The faster you move things in and out, the better off you're going to be. So there's on rat lungworm, okay? It's just a bunch of different cultural practices I use, and at this point I still have some slugs in the garden, but I have very few. There are very few. And if I notice that, something's getting damaged by them, then I'll specifically go after it. But generally, this allows me to actually pull off a crop before they build up a population and start to come back in much. Well, then, let's see. We talked about birds. We talked about nematodes. We talked about rat lungworm. I have videos about rat lungworm. There's a bunch of them out there. I also have videos about my favorite pest, the coqui frog. Coqui! But, of course, he doesn't harm crops, and so I'm going to leave him out. Plus, I already got videos about him anyway. But they are also a major pest if you have ears. If you're deaf, no big deal. They like my lanai, and son of a guns get into the orchid pots on the front porch. I'd be sitting there in the evening, and they scream, and it bounces off the roof, Anyway, they're not a plant pest. Past that, one that's pretty ubiquitous, I don't have a lot of trouble with it, but the Chinese rose beetle. Chinese rose beetle is a scarab type beetle that just chews the heck out of tree foliage mostly. Now they can get into a bunch of other things too, but like Bahania, the Hong Kong orchid tree, all those things are terrible with them. Persimmons, they love to chew up persimmons, bad. Of course, chocolate sapote is a persimmon, and they'll gobble the branches even on that thing. Yeah, they're around, and the solution to the Chinese rose beetle is very simple: light. They feed nocturnally, and if there's light for up to 2 hours after the sun goes down on the plant, they can't figure to feed. They wander off. They find some other place to eat. So I use solar pathway lanterns. They're cheap. You can get them a couple of bucks at Walmart, Buy them by the gross, and I take a shoelace and tie them up in the tops of my susceptible trees. And so when you come by my place and you see the lights on at night, it's not Christmas. I'm scaring away rose beetles. I don't generally use any kind of insecticide on the rose beetle, not required. On the other hand, the lace bug, avocado lace bug, got into the island recently, and is that thing a bugger. There's one where I didn't anticipate the arrival, and I was putting out fires when I finally realized what was going on. People at the state level are a little bit worried that we may not be able to have avocado crops on these islands in the future. This pest is so bad. It'll completely defoliate a tree. You'll know it because the backside of your avocado leaf, it has brown panel on it where the leaf is all dried out, and there'll be some grit on there that rubs off. That's the lace bug. There'll be some bugs in there. You can see them if you look close. You can use magnifying glass. They suck the life out of the trees. They'll just completely strip them. On small trees, I think spinosad is the best solution we have. Spinosad's a bacteria, so it's a biological, it's not a chemical. It was isolated from a tailings heap in a rum distillery in Barbados where they never had any vermin. And somebody went in and analyzed the heap and said, it's got a bacteria. And so we bottle it and sell it. It's easy enough to get. There's probably 40 different labels, and none of them say spinosad right on the top, usually. You have to look at the fine print. You go to Amazon, just type the word spin, S-P-I-N-O, sad, S-A-D, and all the products will come up and become familiar with the different labels. I usually use Monterey Chemicals brand. They call it garden spray, I think is what it's called. It's very effective spray. It's a bacteria that works on just about any kind of a leaf-chewing worm or a hard-bodied insect. So for one, it works on ants. You could actually use this against fire ants if you wish to. it works on roaches, but it also works on honeybees. Okay, so what that means is don't use this stuff on plants that are in the bloom stage. If you have your citruses blooming and you got something chewing on it, you plan to use it, don't spray until the flowers are off. Or if you do spray with the flowers, do it at night or in the late evening when the bees aren't flying, because as long as it's dried on the plant for a couple of hours before the bees come back, it isn't supposed to harm them. So use some caution for pollinating insects when using spinosad, because it is indiscriminate with any hard-bodied insect. On the other hand, then there is a more specific bacteria that most people know called BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. Now, it only works on leaf-chewing worms. So, if you have cabbages, for instance, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, things that get chewed up by that green worm, either BT or spinosad will work on it. I recently applied spinosad on my cabbage crop. Usually that white butterfly that lays those eggs isn't that numerous here, and so the amount of worms that I get in cabbage and broccoli, again, are not really that numerous. Most of the time I just go by and go, and if you don't like that, then take the leaf and fold it over them and go. Usually just, hand picking works with this worm, but they got pretty bad on my cabbage this last crop, and so I sprayed. Because I keep spinosad around, because it's a broader spectrum bacteria, I don't use BT anymore, but easily, if that's what you want to use, it would have worked just fine. Yeah, so, there's bacterial sprays for use on leaf-chewing worms. If you got trouble with the Chinese swallowtail, for instance, the larva gobbling down your citrus leaves, which they do, BT or spinosad will work on that too. I got a drawing line, as I'm saying, hard-bodied insects. Some of the other major insect pests we have around here are the ones referred to as soft-bodied insects, mostly sap sucking insects. Try to say that fast. Yeah, sap sucking insects, the most common ones would be aphids, scale, mealybugs, whiteflies, thrips. The main ones. There are others. Those insects don't respond to BT. They don't respond to spinosad. Best solution when dealing with them is horticultural oil. I ordinarily just throw out the word oil, and everybody goes, huh? Oil? Well, no, horticultural oil. And the all seasons type, the ultra refined types that are good for both winter and summer. There are what they call dormant oils too. I don't recommend them. They're high in sulfur. They could burn. The highly refined ones generally don't. Can't use them too often on most crops because they do load up and they can cause some problems after a while. But they work pretty well on most of those insects. You have to coat the insects with them. So you have to be using, like if the aphids are under the leaves, you're going to be using a tank sprayer so you can spray up, underneath. So you got to hit the insects. Well, I kind of moved away from avocados before I finished. I apologize on that. I mentioned small trees and using spinosad, but a lot of the avocado trees around here are way too big, for that approach. It's really impossible to get the spray far up into these canopies. Now, it can work when you got pressurized spray rigs, driven by a tractor PTO. You can get enough power that you can throw it to the top of the tree. Trombone sprayers, which I don't care for very much, the ones like this, they will do it too. But I'm not fond of them. You have to drop a pickup in a bucket, mix your stuff, throw it in a 5-gallon pail, drag it around with you, like playing a trombone. But they do get a spray to the top of the tree. I didn't want to go through any of that, and so I stepped outside of my usual approach. Generally speaking, I'm either organic or I don't use pest controls hardly at all. I just tolerate. But this one was too bad, and so I went to Imidacloprid, which is a synthetic neonicotine molecule. It's basically the same active ingredient in a cigarette. So what that means is, being a guy who early in life, along with most Americans, smoked plenty of cigarettes, I'm well aware of the fact that nicotine is a slow death, not a fast one. I'm not particularly worried about having it on my plants. Okay. Now, it has been synthesized and tricked out, so it has a systemic action, means it pulls it up into the plant from the ground. Don't have to put it on the tree, put it on the ground. Sucks it up into the tree. And it also has a time release factor in it that will allow it to continue to release for as much as 12 months afterwards. Well, it does work on the lace bugs, but I don't recommend that anybody use imidacloprid on their avocados until after flower. Bees aren't big on avocado flowers. You know, we get a lot of flies and stuff that pollinate them, but you know, if there's imidacloprid active in the tree and a bee comes over and goes to the flower and drinks the nectar, it's messed. That's most likely a planetary problem of colony decline disorder with honeybees is probably because of the rampant use of imidacloprid on crops across the planet. Whether you know this or not, almost every cucumber, melon, potato, tomatoes grown in California, they're laced with it. We've been labeled for at least 2 or 3 decades for allowing the human consumer to eat imidacloprid. Yeah. They were very cautious about the garden labels for a number of years, but recently they let loose with that too. They said, forget it. Everybody can eat this stuff. It's good for you. Take a spoon. So anyway, that's what I did. It did work. It stopped them in their tracks. And I did it right after flower so that there weren't any bee problems. Now, flowering is starting to come back, and by now the imidacloprid is quite a bit broken down, and so I'm assuming I'm not going to get into a problem where I'm killing pollinators. And if I use it again or have to use it again, I'm going to wait until after bloom again. Okay, so let's see here. We have talked about rat lungworm, coqui frogs, nematodes, the birds, the rose beetles, the green worms in your cabbages. We've talked a little bit about sap sucking insects. Let's continue there. Citrus, for instance. Citrus is a tree that I find almost always has attacks of either scale or aphids. Very common in citrus. And the aphids, they'll distort the foliage and they'll leave black junk all over your tree from the honeydew, from the mold that grows on it. And scale do the same thing, and they weaken the plants, and so you want to be rid of them. A very important note about sap-sucking insects. Most of the time, the only reason they're in your tree is the ants put them there. Okay. Ants farm sap-sucking insects. They have an agriculture. Truly, they are farmers. I actually sort of admire them, being a farmer myself. But they farm aphid, for instance, the same way I would farm dairy cow. Yeah, they take the aphids and they move the aphids to the succulent tip growing shoots where the greatest sap run is at, move them to green pastures, right? And then the ants cluster around their aphid cows and they defend them. If ladybugs get in and try to eat them, or lacewings, or parasitic wasps come along, the ants will go after the insects that are trying to mess with their aphids. The aphids, as they suck the juice from the plant, will excrete the extra juice processed as a sugar syrup. It comes out of their anus. Tasty. And it rains off the bugs all over the place. That's how you get this sticky black junk all over your fruit trees, for instance, is from the sap rain that comes off the aphid. And the aphid is farmed by the ant, because what the ant does is they actually go to the aphid and they stroke the aphid just like me trying to stroke cow tits, and they milk the aphid. They collect the sugar sap and they take it back to feed the colony with it. So aphids don't have teeth, okay? They got no claws. Ants do, and they're rather formidable. I'm sure, this old saying, got ants in the pants, boy, it hurts. So if you can keep the ants out of your trees, you're going to have less problems. So we're back to putting out fires long before they ever occur. Solutions, by the way you're approaching things. If you band your trees with tanglefoot, that's a sticky vegetable goop you can buy in a tube or a tub. Band the trees with tanglefoot. The ants can't cross it. The recommendations on the label would be to put some sort of barrier down on the tree trunk before you put the goop on, because some young trees with tender bark might find themselves susceptible to the pine tar that's in that goop. And so Tanglefoot does sell a tree wrap that you can put it on. In the past, I've used duct tape. One piece of duct tape, smear the Tanglefoot all over it. That'll keep the ants out. You can also bait with sugar water and boric acid in little tubs at the base of the tree. If you got a trail of ants that have been going up your tree, if you mix up 314, the recipe's 314. You got 3 cups of water, 1 cup of sugar, and you got 4 teaspoons of boric acid. Put in the jug, shake it up, put it in some kind of container that will keep the water out, and then flick a little on the ant trail. The ants will go for it. They'll start taking the sugar water out, carry it back, feed the whole colony, and slowly poison them without realizing what's happening. That'll help it too. So I'm trying to think, what the heck else goes on around here? Yes, what I forgot. Yes, I forgot all about diseases. Sure, we got them. Here, fungus and rot. Fungus and rot, they're the 2 major ones, right? Fungus and rot, huh, Gracie? Huh? Good thing kitties don't get too much fungus. You don't get athlete's foot, do you? Yeah. Now, that's, I think an important issue here is that the white mold, powdery mildew, it's where you get this white junk all over the top, of the leaves. And if you rub it, it smells like mushrooms. That's the easiest, fastest way to figure it out. Yeah, it smells like mushrooms. And that one's a dry weather fungus. Yeah, most people don't realize that. Rain prevents mildew. Overhead irrigation prevents mildew because it washes the spores off the leaves. Yeah, and so people get confused. They think, oh no, it must be associated with all the rain. No, it's got to do with mild temperatures that don't get too high or too low, so it's always in the perfect growth range here. It has to do with high atmospheric humidity. It likes moisture on the leaf to grow, but it doesn't like rain, especially the heavy rains we get around here. It knocks that stuff right off. But as far as organic controls, actually a pretty good one, right out of the kitchen cabinet. Water, canola oil, and baking soda. Yeah, I usually use a teaspoon of canola oil, a teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 quart of water. You can spray that on the stuff, and of course it's edible and it's not dangerous. So, if you get powdery mildew on your pakalolo, it's a reasonable possibility to use that. Otherwise, on powdery mildew and on almost every other fungus we have, I use copper copper sulfate or metallic copper. Can be purchased in bottles. Mix it with water, spray it. Copper is a heavy metal. On the other hand, we handle copper all the time. Our water pipes are made out of copper. We got copper bottom pots, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's minute amounts of copper occasionally are not a problem. They cycle into the environment. Copper is a naturally occurring mineral, you know, and so on. And so that's not overly dangerous. Plus, copper washes off pretty easy if you have to use it on something anyhow. But I like copper. It's broad spectrum. Almost every one of the diseases and the rots we get here, like you got problems growing tomatoes, try using copper. Okay, now you're going to have to spray it periodically because plants grow, and so the new growth doesn't have any copper on it. So, you know, you have to kind of repeat this. But I like copper as a fungicide. It's not overly lethal. It doesn't smell bad. It's not like sulfur, for instance. If you get it on, you can burn, get it in your eyes. It's very bad, and it stinks. I don't care for sulfur much, but sulfur is another fungicide, and it's an organic. You know, copper is actually on the list of organic fungicides in the United States of America, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. All right. I don't necessarily myself really consider it very organic, but I use it. It's very useful on rots like botrytis too. That's where you get that brown rot. It gets into flowers, you know, it'll rot the flower buds off your plants, you know. It gets into just about anything around here. It generally tends to be brown as a squishy rot, and then sometimes we'll develop a fuzzy gray mold associated with it. So it's a fuzzy gray mold and a brown rot. Copper does work on it. The other one that I am plagued with here is Downy Mildew. Ugh. I never had Downy Mildew anywhere else I ever lived. Unlike Powdery Mildew, which is on the top side of the leaf, Downy Mildew's on the underside. And so spraying overhead won't do you any good. It's the worst problem I have with it is on my basil. And the best solution is use Downy Mildew resistant basils. Prospera I had out here recently. It's resistant. It's not immune, and I haven't run across a basil yet that is immune, but the resistant varieties help a lot. I don't get a lot of rust fungus problems here, but we could. I guess I get rust on jabuticaba. I do, on the fruit skin, actually. It's a little different. A lot of times rust is little brown pustules underneath the leaves. So like, you know, on roses, hollyhocks, those two places where I'm very familiar with seeing rust. So that's a problem you have to work with from underneath again. It's underneath the foliage. And so any sprays you're applying, copper, have to come up from the bottom. And so folks who don't like tank sprayers, you get a problem because most other tools do not work up from underneath. And this is why a tank sprayer is great. I guess we got a little citrus scab here. That's actually relatively new for me. I had never seen it in California, and I'd never seen it on my citrus here. But I had a gentleman approach me too, actually, with the problem, and I really didn't quite know what it was initially. I do now know because it showed up on my trees this year on some of the fruit. I get scab on some of the fruit. It's corky lesions, deforms the fruit a little bit. That can again be treated with fungicides, but you got to be there ahead of the game. You have to know that you have had scab problems in the past, and so after the flowering is finished in the trees, you go through and you put a spray of copper down to help eliminate it. Another one on citrus that we have here too is the citrus leaf miner. Most leaf miners are flies, and there are leaf miner flies around here that will get into Swiss chard and beets and stuff like that. They leave little trails, galleries through the leaves. But the one that gets onto citrus is actually a moth. And it has a larva that tunnels into the leaf, and it eats the tissue between the two outside layers of the leaf. And so the leaves pucker, they distort, they get these, areas where everything turns gray underneath and so on. That's a hard one. Citrus leaf miner, honestly, don't bother with it. That's suggestion from agricultural colleges too, because in most cases on citrus, it's not that damaging. But I know gardeners will look at it and see their foliage all distorted, and they get angry and they want to do something. And so one of the first things people do is they prune off the damaged foliage. Bad. Because all you did was stimulate rapid regrowth again. And so the miner loves succulent growth. And so by pruning, you're creating a situation for it. It is possible, if your timing's just right, you could use spinosad, but not very likely. Since the larva is inside the leaf, it's really hard to deal with. Since it's not that dangerous, my suggestion is don't mess with it. If you must, then we're back to imidacloprid. It is labeled for this purpose. I'm just about out of pest problem ideas. I'm sure there are a bunch more. I mean, obviously we have the coffee bean borer. We got the coffee rust is here. We got all kinds of problems. This island is paradise equals pests. Truly, we got all kinds of new stuff showing up every day. That too, but that's, well, that should cover a little bit of it. You get corn earworms. Those of you who grow corn, there's an earworm. You can treat for him too. Spinosad on the silk, oil on the silk early on, if you catch it, will eliminate this problem. I just, when I'm peeking, I'll pull a little bit of the ear down to see if the corn's ripe, and if I find a worm, I just smash them. Timely harvest again. If you're getting your corn off the stalk at just the right time, most likely your worm has not gone very far, and you can just pare the tip off, get rid of the worm, smash them, and everything's good. That's my usual approach. I usually use insecticides on that critter. So tolerance is a big part of the way I deal with bugs around here. I don't necessarily react because I see chewing. It's part of life. So a whole lot of what happens around here just happens, and I do nothing about it. Now, I didn't start talking about the furry problems, okay, because we have rats and mice, which are awful too. I have videos on those subjects too, just like coqui frogs and rat lungworm. There are a lot of videos out there on my channel. If anybody doesn't know how to find them, easiest way, go to the top of the page where YouTube has a search box. Type Green Garden Guy digit 1 / whatever the topic is you're looking for. You want to find about rat lungworm, type ratworm or whatever, Don't give Google too much information. Make it think. You'll pop up videos, some of which were done a decade ago. I've been at this for quite a while. I don't even know what I have. And so I have to use that technique myself when I'm trying to find anything in my channel. Yep. Search box, Green Garden Guy 1 / whatever you're trying to find. Chances are, if you get the search done just right, you never know how I titled it, right? But if you get the search done right, you probably find what you're looking for already anyway. Most of the time I get people asking me, Bill, will you do a video about this, do a video about that? I go, man, I've done dozens of those. They are there. I mean, I have lost count. There is well over 1,000 videos. We're probably near 1,500 or so that have been posted up there since 2008. Yeah, it's all good. Even the old videos, person complaining yesterday about pest control videos. Actually, I've done all those in the past. There's hundreds of them. What do you mean? I don't do. You gotta look backwards on my channel too, not just at the moment. Sometimes at the moment I'm talking about Ukraine, Or I'm talking about my cat. These days I'm retired. I don't care. All right? So look backwards into the channel. You may find what you need. There's some really good videos back there. I know, I did them myself. All right, folks, y'all hang loose and aloha.